My daughter's drawing predicted tomorrow's fire. That's what I tell people now when they ask how I knew. But that isn't the whole truth. It wasn't a warning. It was a blueprint, meticulously rendered in waxy crayon by a 7-year-old hand. She slid it across the polished oak of the dining table last night, her small face clouded with a concentration that was usually reserved for building elaborate Lego castles. "For you, Mommy," she'd whispered, her voice a little too solemn for a Tuesday evening. I'd smiled, the automatic, weary smile of a mother who has been solo parenting for 6 months, ever since my husband Mark was taken from us. I expected a unicorn, or maybe our cat Marmalade, drawn with a lopsided, cheerful grin. Instead, I found myself looking at our house. Our 2-story colonial, the one Mark and I had bought with our wedding money, was engulfed in a furious scribble of orange and red and yellow. Black crayon smoke billowed from the upstairs windows, from Lily's bedroom window. My heart gave a painful little lurch. But children draw scary things. It's how they process big, frightening emotions, and God knows our world had been nothing but frightening for half a year. But then my eyes caught the details. At the bottom of the page, tucked beside the neatly drawn azalea bushes, was a small bright red rectangle with a little spout, a gas can. To the right, sitting safely on the green crayon lawn, was a perfect square with a handle and a crudely drawn cat face peeking out. Marmalade's carrier. And there, standing under the old oak tree at the edge of the property, was a stick figure. It had a triangle dress and a wide, beaming red crayon smile. Long, loopy brown hair, just like my sister-in-law's, fell to its shoulders, and its name was written above its head in Lily's careful, looping print, Aunt Diane. I must have been staring at it for a full minute, the sounds of the house fading into a low hum. Diane, who was in the kitchen humming along to the radio as she loaded the dishwasher, called out, "Everything okay in there, Clara?" Her voice was the same as always, warm, syrupy, a comforting balm since Mark's accident. She'd moved in 3 months ago to help out, a gesture of familial love that had felt like a lifeline. Now, looking at this drawing, it felt like an anchor pulling me under. I folded the paper quickly, my hands trembling slightly. "Just admiring Lily's artwork," I called back, forcing a lightness into my tone that felt like swallowing glass. Lily was watching me, her blue eyes, Mark's eyes, wide and searching. "Is it a good picture, Mommy?" I pulled her into my lap, burying my face in her strawberry-scented hair. "It's a very detailed picture, sweetheart. Very creative." I couldn't bring myself to say it was good. The smiling stick figure under the oak tree was seared onto the back of my eyelids. Diane came back into the room, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Oh, let me see," she said, her own smile as bright and wide as the one in the drawing. I clutched the paper tighter. "Oh, it's just some scribbles. She's getting tired." Lily, sensing my tension, leaned into me, silent. Diane's eyes flickered from my face to my hand, and for a fraction of a second, her smile tightened. It was a minuscule change, a barely perceptible twitch of a muscle, but in the suddenly charged atmosphere of the room, it felt like a seismic shift. "Well, let's get this little artist to bed," she said, her voice once again oozing with affection. "I'll finish up in here. You go on up." As I carried Lily upstairs, I could feel Diane's gaze on my back. I tucked my daughter into her bed, surrounded by a fortress of stuffed animals, and kissed her forehead. "Why was Aunt Diane smiling at the fire?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Lily's eyes were already half closed. "Because she said it would make all the sad things go away," she murmured, before drifting into sleep. I stood in the dim light of her unicorn nightlight, the folded drawing clutched in my hand, and a cold, terrifying certainty began to crystallize in my chest. Diane wasn't here to help us. She was here to finish what Mark's accident had started. She was here to erase us. And my daughter, my quiet, watchful daughter, had given me the blueprint of how she was going to do it. The question that echoed in the sudden, deafening silence of my mind was no longer what the drawing meant, but whether I had enough time to stop it from coming true. The house felt different that night. Each creak of the floorboards a footstep, every rustle of leaves outside the window a threat. I knew I was holding a prophecy, a child's innocent rendering of a monstrous plan, and the smiling stick figure of Aunt Diane would haunt my waking and sleeping hours. I didn't sleep. I sat on my bed, the drawing spread out on the duvet under the soft glow of my bedside lamp. Every detail seemed to scream at me. The placement of the gas can, right by the back door, next to the dryer vent, a perfect ignition point. The cat carrier on the lawn, a small act of mercy that felt more like a calculated detail to make the whole thing look like a tragic accident I'd tried to escape. A grieving widow, overwhelmed, makes a mistake, leaves something on the stove, a faulty wire, anything. But she had the presence of mind to save the family pet. It was all so plausible. And then there was Diane, smiling. Because it would make all the sad things go away. What sad things? The mortgage payments? The mountain of debt Mark had left behind? A secret I'd only discovered weeks after his funeral? A secret I had only shared with Diane, sobbing in her arms in the very kitchen she now commandeered. She had patted my back, murmuring about insurance money, about how we'd be taken care of. "Mark wouldn't want you to worry about money, Clara," she had said, her voice thick with sympathy. "He made sure you and Lily would be set for life." I thought she meant his love, his memory. I now realized she meant his life insurance policy, a $2 million policy. The thought was so grotesque, so monstrous, that my mind recoiled from it. This was Diane, Mark's older sister. The woman who had held my hand during his funeral, the woman who made Lily pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. She couldn't be capable of such a thing. Could she? I crept out of my room, the floorboards cold beneath my bare feet. The house was silent except for the rhythmic hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I tiptoed to the top of the stairs and listened. Nothing. I went back for the drawing, folded it carefully, and tucked it into the pocket of my robe. My first instinct was to confront her, to throw the drawing in her face and scream until my throat was raw. But the smiling stick figure stopped me. That wasn't the face of someone who would crumble under questioning. It was the face of someone who had planned, who was confident. A confrontation would only make her more careful, or worse, accelerate her timeline. No, I had to be smarter than that. I had to find proof, something more concrete than a child's drawing. My mind started racing, replaying the last few weeks in a frantic, disjointed slideshow. Small, insignificant moments suddenly took on a sinister new light. 2 weeks ago, the smoke detector in the upstairs hallway had started chirping. Diane had been the one to fix it, climbing a stepladder with a cheerful, "I'll handle it, you rest." I hadn't thought to check it afterward. Now, a cold dread washed over me. I pulled a chair from Lily's room, my movements slow and deliberate, and dragged it silently into the hall. Climbing onto it, my hand shaking, I reached up and twisted the plastic cover. It came off easily. The space where the 9-volt battery should have been was empty. My breath hitched in my throat. It wasn't broken. It had been disabled. A wave of nausea rolled over me. I leaned against the wall, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was real. This was happening. I thought about her car. Yesterday she'd come home from running errands, complaining about having to fill up the lawnmower tank. Honestly, you'd think they could make gas cans that don't spill all over the place, she'd grumbled, tossing her keys on the counter. We didn't own a lawnmower. Our yard was maintained by a landscaping service, a luxury Mark had insisted on. At the time, I'd barely registered the comment, my mind foggy with grief. Now it was a blaring alarm. I had to get into her car. I slipped back into my room and pulled on a pair of jeans and a dark sweatshirt. The keys were on the little ceramic dish by the front door where we all left them. I lifted them, the metal cool and heavy in my palm. Each jingle of the keys sounded like a gunshot in the silent house. I held them tightly to stop the noise and crept to the back door, the same door where the gas can sat in Lily's, drawing. I unlocked it, my fingers fumbling with the deadbolt, and slipped out into the chilly night air. The moon was a pale sliver, casting long, eerie shadows across the lawn. Diane's sedan was parked in the driveway. I pressed the button on the fob, and the car chirped softly, unlocking its doors. I froze, my eyes darting toward the house, toward Diane's downstairs bedroom window. I waited, holding my breath, but no lights came on. I opened the passenger door and slid inside, pulling it shut as quietly as I could. The car smelled faintly of her perfume, a cloying gardenia scent that now made my stomach turn. I fumbled for the button to open the glove compartment. Inside were maps, napkins, a half-eaten roll of mints. Nothing. I checked the center console, the side pockets of the doors. Still nothing. Frustration and fear began to bubble up inside me. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just a grieving, paranoid woman turning a child's nightmare into a reality. Then I remembered the trunk. I got out of the car and used the key fob to pop it open. The lid lifted with a soft hydraulic hiss. And there it was. Tucked in the corner, behind a reusable grocery bag and a folded blanket, was a brand new fire engine red gas can. It was empty, but the smell of gasoline still clung to the plastic, and lying right next to it was a receipt from the hardware store, dated yesterday afternoon. I picked it up, my hand shaking so hard I could barely read the print. 1 5-gallon gas can, 1 pack of disposable lighters. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a paranoid delusion. It was a shopping list for murder. I stood there in the moonlight, the hardware store receipt clutched in my hand, a flimsy piece of paper that felt as heavy as a death sentence. The smiling stick figure in Lily's drawing wasn't just a child's fantasy. It was a portrait of a predator hiding in plain sight. I carefully folded the receipt and slipped it into my pocket alongside the drawing. I couldn't leave it for her to find, but I couldn't take the gas can. She would notice it was missing. I had to leave everything looking exactly as it was. I closed the trunk, the soft click echoing in the silent driveway, and crept back into the house, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Locking the back door behind me, I leaned against it, taking deep, shuddering breaths. The house no longer felt like my home. It felt like a cage, and the zookeeper was planning to set it on fire. I went back upstairs and slid into bed, but the thought of sleep was impossible. My mind was a whirlwind of memories, each one being re-examined, recontextualized through the horrifying lens of what I now knew. I remembered conversations with Diane after Mark's death, her endless probing questions about our finances. At the time, they'd seemed born of concern. "Are you sure you'll be okay, Clara? Mark was so secretive about his business dealings. You just never know." She'd say it with a worried frown, her hand on my arm. Now I saw it for what it was. Reconnaissance. She was assessing the value of her investment, the potential payout for her monstrous act. How deep did this go? I found myself questioning everything, even Mark's accident. He'd been on a business trip, a late-night drive on a winding country road. A single car crash, the police report said. He must have fallen asleep at the wheel. It was a tragedy, but it was straightforward. Or was it? Had Diane been involved somehow? Had she tampered with his car? The thought was a venomous serpent slithering into my mind, poisoning every memory I had of my husband's final days. I pushed it away. I couldn't afford to spiral into that particular abyss. I had to focus on the immediate threat. I had to protect Lily. Tomorrow. The drawing said tomorrow. I didn't know if that was a literal prediction or just a child's sense of the near future, but I had to assume it was accurate. That gave me less than 24 hours. What could I do? I couldn't go to the police. What would I tell them? My daughter drew a picture, and my sister-in-law bought a gas can. They would look at me with pity, a grieving widow cracking under the strain. They would tell me to get some rest, maybe talk to a therapist. They wouldn't see the empty battery compartment of the smoke detector or the cold calculation in Diane's eyes. They wouldn't understand until it was too late, until our names were a tragic headline on the local news. I had to save us myself. I needed more proof. I needed to catch her in the act, or at least catch her talking about it. The idea of recording her, of using her own words against her, began to form in my mind. It felt like something out of a movie, a desperate, risky plan, but it was the only thing I could think of. The next morning, I came downstairs to the smell of coffee and bacon. Diane was at the stove, humming that same cheerful tune from the night before. She turned and gave me a brilliant smile. "Morning, sleepyhead. I let you rest. You looked like you needed it." Her kindness was a physical assault. It was a mask, so perfectly worn that it was impossible to see the monster beneath. I had to play my part just as well. I forced a weak, tired smile. "Thanks, Diane. I was just so exhausted." I watched her every move as she bustled around the kitchen. The way her hands, the same hands that bought the gas can, expertly flipped the bacon. The way her voice, the same voice that would probably whisper to a co-conspirator, cooed at Lily when she came downstairs. "Good morning, my little pancake princess," she chirped. Lily, usually so bubbly in the mornings, was subdued. She slid into her chair and gave me a look, a quick, questioning glance. She knew something was wrong. Children always do. They feel the seismic shifts in the emotional landscape long before adults are willing to acknowledge them. I had to protect her from the tension, from the terror that was gripping me. "So, what are our plans for the big day?" Diane asked, setting a plate of food in front of me. "Anything special you want to do?" Her tone was casual, but her eyes were sharp, watching me. I realized with a jolt what day it was. Wednesday. The day Mark and I had our first date. She knew. She was choosing this day deliberately to add another layer of tragic irony to the story she was crafting. I don't know," I stammered, pushing the bacon around my plate. "Maybe just a quiet day at home. Go through some of Mark's old photos." It was the perfect answer for a grieving widow. It also meant we would be right here, in the house, exactly where she needed us to be. "That sounds lovely," she said, her smile never faltering. A day of quiet reflection. The mask was perfect. Throughout the day, I tried to act normal, a hollowed-out version of myself. We looked at photo albums, and I had to listen to Diane share warm, loving anecdotes about her brother while my insides twisted into knots. I watched Lily, who stayed close to my side, her small hand often finding its way into mine. I knew I had to get away to buy the recording device. I made an excuse about needing to pick up a prescription at the pharmacy. Diane's eyes narrowed slightly. "Oh, I could go for you, sweetie. You should rest." "No," I said, a little too firmly. "I need the air. I just need to get out of the house for a bit." To my surprise, she relented. "Of course. Take your time." As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw her watching from the living room window, a shadowy figure behind the glass. The feeling of being watched was suffocating. Every second I was away felt like a second I was leaving Lily alone with her. But I had no choice. This was our only way out. The drive to the electronics store was a blur of traffic lights and mounting panic. Every minute that ticked by was a minute Lily was alone in that house with Diane. I kept picturing her small face, her trusting eyes, and it was like gasoline on the fire of my fear. I had to hurry. I found what I was looking for in a section of the store labeled Home Security. It was a small, unassuming black cube, a USB wall charger with a pinhole camera and a microphone embedded in its face. It recorded high-definition video and audio to a micro SD card and was motion-activated. It was perfect, deceptively normal. I bought 2, along with the largest capacity memory cards they had. One for the living room, where Diane spent most of her time on the phone, and one for the upstairs hallway, aimed at Lily's bedroom door and the disabled smoke detector. The cashier gave me an uninterested glance as he rang up my purchase, and for a wild moment I wanted to grab him by the collar and scream, "My sister-in-law is trying to kill me!" But I just smiled, paid in cash, and walked out, the small, heavy bag feeling like a lifeline. The drive home was even worse. My mind conjured 1,000 terrible scenarios. What if Diane had hurt her? What if she'd decided to move up her schedule? I pulled into the driveway, my tires crunching on the gravel, and ran into the house. The sight that greeted me almost made my knees buckle with relief. Lily and Diane were on the living room floor, building a tower of colorful blocks. Laughter filled the room. For a split second, I felt a wave of doubt. Could I be wrong? Could this all be a terrible, grief-fueled misunderstanding? Then Diane looked up at me, and her smile was just a little too bright, her eyes just a little too sharp. "Welcome back. Did you get what you needed?" she asked. The mask was back in place. "Yes," I said, my voice tight. "Everything's fine." I had to get the cameras set up without her noticing. I went upstairs, claiming I had a headache and needed to lie down. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open the blister packs. I plugged the first charger into an outlet in the hallway, angling it carefully. It was a high-traffic area, a natural place for a charger to be. It looked completely innocuous. The second one was trickier. I needed it in the living room. I waited until Diane went into the kitchen to start dinner, her back to me. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. I walked over to the wall socket behind the armchair where she always sat to read or talk on her phone. I unplugged the lamp that was there, plugged in the camera charger, and then plugged the lamp into the USB port on the front of it. It looked perfect, functional, normal. Now all I could do was wait. The waiting was the worst part. The hours leading up to dinner were an exercise in supreme self-control. I played my part, the sad, withdrawn widow. I helped Lily with her homework, my mind a million miles away. I listened to Diane chatter on about her day, about a funny email from a coworker, all the mundane details of a life that was a complete fabrication. Every word she spoke felt like a lie. I was acutely aware of the tiny electronic eyes and ears that were now watching and listening, our silent, secret witnesses. Dinner was a quiet affair. I could barely eat. Every bite felt like sawdust in my mouth. Diane, however, was in high spirits. After we cleared the dishes, she announced she had a surprise. "In honor of Mark," she said, her voice soft and reverent. "I thought we could have a little toast. I bought a bottle of that fancy wine he loved." She produced a bottle of expensive Cabernet and 2 glasses. She didn't offer any to Lily, of course, who was already getting ready for bed. A cold premonition washed over me. This was it. This was part of the plan. She poured the deep red liquid into the glasses, her back to me. I watched her reflection in the dark glass of the oven door. Her movements were smooth, practiced. But for a split second, I saw her right hand dip into the pocket of her apron before she brought the glasses to the table. She handed one to me, her smile unwavering. "To Mark," she said, raising her glass. "He would have wanted us to be happy." I looked down at the dark wine in my glass. It looked the same as hers, but I knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that it wasn't. My mind raced. I couldn't refuse to drink it. That would be too suspicious. But I couldn't drink it either. My gaze darted around the room, searching for a way out. My eyes landed on the potted ficus tree in the corner of the dining room. It was a desperate, flimsy idea, but it was the only one I had. I raised my glass. "To Mark," I echoed, my voice thick with an emotion that she would mistake for grief. I took a small, performative sip, letting the wine touch my lips but not swallowing it. Then, as I lowered the glass, I let my hand tremble, as if overcome with sadness. "Oh, I'm sorry," I gasped, turning my body toward the plant, as if to set the glass down on the end table beside it. In that swift, fluid motion, with my back partially to her, I tilted the glass just enough, pouring the entire contents into the soil of the ficus tree. It happened in less than 2 seconds. "Clara, are you okay?" Diane asked, her voice sharp with what sounded like concern, but I knew was vigilance. I turned back to her, dabbing at my eyes with my napkin. "I'm sorry," I whispered. It's a hard day." I placed the now empty glass on the table. "That was silly of me. I don't think I can drink tonight after all." Diane looked from my face to the empty glass and then back again. A flicker of something, annoyance, frustration, crossed her features before it was smoothed away. "Of course I understand," she said, her voice dripping with sympathy. "Don't you worry about a thing. You just go ahead and get some rest. I'll clean up here." She wanted me to go to bed. She needed me unconscious. The script was proceeding just as she'd planned. I just had to make sure I was awake for the final act. I went upstairs, my legs feeling like lead. The feigned grief and the very real terror were exhausting me, draining my physical and mental resources. I knew the next few hours would require every ounce of strength I had left. I went into Lily's room first. She was already asleep, her breathing soft and even in the dim glow of her nightlight. I stood over her for a long moment, my heart aching with a love so fierce it was a physical pain. I was her only protector. Mark was gone. It was all on me. The thought didn't crush me. It solidified something inside me, a core of pure, unyielding resolve. I would not let that woman harm a single hair on her head. I went to my own room and closed the door, but I didn't get into bed. I couldn't risk falling asleep, not even for a minute. I sat in the armchair by the window that overlooked the backyard, the same view as in Lily's drawing. The moon was higher now, casting a sterile silver light over the manicured lawn and the dark, silent trees. From here, I could see the top of the old oak. I imagined the smiling stick figure standing there, watching the house burn. A shudder racked my body. I opened the window a crack, letting the cold night air wash over my face, hoping it would keep me alert. The house fell into a deep silence. I listened, straining my ears for any sound. For a long time, there was nothing but the normal nighttime groans of a house settling. Then I heard it. A soft click from downstairs. The sound of the back door opening. My blood turned to ice. She was starting. I remained frozen in my chair, every muscle tensed. I couldn't move, couldn't risk making a sound. I was a passive observer, a future ghost in my own home, waiting for the final act to play out. I heard faint muffled sounds from outside, a scraping noise, the soft thud of something being set down on the patio, the gas can. My mind provided the visuals, filling in the blanks of what my ears were picking up. I could picture her, moving silently in the darkness, her face set in grim determination. The mask of the loving aunt was gone, replaced by the cold, efficient face of a killer. Time seemed to warp, stretching and slowing. Each second was an eternity. I heard her come back inside, the door clicking shut again, then footsteps on the stairs. They were slow, measured, confident. She was coming to check on me. I scrambled from the chair and dove into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin. I turned onto my side, facing away from the door, and forced my breathing into a deep, even rhythm, mimicking sleep. It was the hardest acting I have ever done. My heart was a wild bird trapped in my ribcage, threatening to betray me with its frantic beating. The doorknob turned with an agonizingly slow creak. The door opened. I could feel her presence in the room, a cold spot in the warm darkness. I could feel her eyes on me. I didn't dare move a muscle. I just kept breathing, in and out, the picture of a grieving widow, sedated and lost to the world. She stood there for what felt like a lifetime, 10 seconds, maybe 30. Then she backed out of the room, pulling the door quietly shut. I waited, counting to 100 before I allowed myself to move. I slid out of bed, my body trembling uncontrollably. I crept to the door and pressed my ear against the cool wood. I could hear her moving around downstairs again. A new sound reached me now, faint but unmistakable. A sloshing sound. And with it, a smell. The sharp, acrid scent of gasoline seeping up through the floorboards. It was a smell I would never forget. It was the smell of my own murder. She was pouring it. All over the downstairs floors, the living room, the dining room, the base of the stairs, creating a death trap with no escape. My stomach heaved, and I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a sob. I had to get Lily. I had to get out. But not yet. I needed the final piece of evidence. I needed her confession. And then I heard it. Her voice, a low murmur from the living room directly below my bedroom. She was on the phone. I dropped to the floor, pressing my ear against the hardwood, trying to make out the words through the thick barrier of the ceiling. "No, everything's fine," she was saying. "She drank the whole glass. She'll be out for hours." A pause. "Lily, too. I put some in her milk tonight. Just a little. She'll sleep right through it." A wave of pure white-hot rage washed over me, so powerful it momentarily eclipsed my fear. My daughter. She had drugged my daughter. I had been so focused on my own glass of wine that I hadn't even considered that she would do something so vile, so unthinkable to a child. "The whole place is soaked," Diane continued, her voice cold and businesslike. "I'll light it from the outside, by the back door, just like we planned. It'll go up so fast they'll never know what hit them. The fire department will say it was faulty wiring, probably. The old house, the grieving widow, it's the perfect story." Another pause. Her next words sealed her fate. "The insurance money will be more than enough to cover your debts and set us both up for life. Mark was a fool to leave everything to her. He always was a soft touch. Well, this time, his softness pays off for us." It was all there. The motive, the plan, the conspiracy. The tiny camera in the USB charger was capturing it all. I had her. Now, I just had to survive the night to use it. I heard her hang up the phone. Footsteps moved toward the back of the house. This was my chance. It was now or never. I had to move, and I had to be fast. I ran on silent feet into Lily's room. Her nightlight cast a soft glow on her sleeping face. She looked so peaceful, so innocent, completely unaware of the danger that was moments away from consuming her. I gently scooped her into my arms. She stirred, murmuring something in her sleep, but she didn't wake. The sedative. That evil woman. Carrying Lily, I moved as quickly and quietly as I could down the hallway. I paused to pull the camera charger from the wall socket, stuffing it into my pocket. My hands were shaking, but my mind was preternaturally clear. Get Lily. Get the cat. Get the evidence. Get out. The smell of gasoline was overpowering now, a thick, nauseating fume that coated the back of my throat. It was the smell of death, and it was everywhere. I reached the top of the stairs and peered down into the darkness. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel the presence of the accelerant, a volatile promise of the inferno to come. Going down the stairs was not an option. That was the path to the main fire, the path she expected us to be trapped by. My mind raced, searching for another way out. My bedroom window. It faced the backyard, but there was a steep drop to the patio below. Too high to jump, especially carrying Lily. Then I remembered the trellis. The old, sturdy wooden trellis Mark had built for my climbing roses, running right up the wall to just below my window. It was our only hope. I shifted Lily's weight in my arms and darted back into my bedroom. Marmalade, our ginger cat, was huddled under the bed, his eyes wide with fear. He could smell it too. "Come on, buddy," I whispered, reaching under and pulling him out. He was trembling. I didn't have the carrier. It was already on the lawn, according to the blueprint. I tucked him under one arm, holding him tightly against my body, while Lily was draped over my other shoulder. My arms screamed with the strain of their combined weight. I hurried to the window and fumbled with the lock. It was old and stiff. For a terrifying second, it wouldn't budge. Panic flared in my chest, hot and sharp. I pushed harder, using the heel of my hand, and with a painful crack, the lock gave way. I slid the window open, a gust of cold night air rushing in. It did little to disperse the gasoline fumes. I looked down. The trellis was about 2 feet below the windowsill. It looked so fragile from up here. I had to get the camera from the living room. The confession was on that memory card. I couldn't leave it behind. I gently laid Lily down on the floor, well away from the open window. "Stay here, sweetie," I whispered to her sleeping form. "Mommy will be right back." I handed Marmalade to her, placing him on her chest. He curled up instantly, as if he knew his job was to stay with her. I crept out of the bedroom and back to the top of the stairs. The living room was just below. I could hear Diane outside now, her footsteps on the gravel path that ran along the side of the house. She was making her final preparations. I had seconds. I flew down the stairs, my bare feet slapping against the wood. I didn't dare turn on a light. The darkness was thick, but the moonlight coming through the windows gave the room a ghostly glow. The air was so thick with fumes it was hard to breathe. I could see a dark sheen on the floorboards, the pools of gasoline catching the pale light. I ran to the armchair, my heart in my throat, and snatched the USB charger from the wall. I shoved it deep into my pocket with the other one. As I turned to run back up the stairs, I heard a sound that froze my blood. A metallic click from the back door. The sound of a lighter. She was here. She was about to do it. There was no time to go back up the stairs. The fire would erupt from the base, cutting off my escape. The front door, I ran for it, fumbling with the deadbolt in the darkness. My fingers were slick with sweat. The lock wouldn't turn. It was jammed. Or had she done something to it? A new wave of terror washed over me. I was trapped. I could hear her just outside the back door now, muttering to herself. "Come on, you stupid thing," she hissed. The lighter wasn't working. I was being given a gift of a few precious seconds. I abandoned the front door and looked around the downstairs, my eyes wild with desperation. The window in the dining room. It was an old sash window, heavy and hard to open, but it faced the front yard, away from where she was. I ran to it, my lungs burning from the fumes. I pushed at the sash with all my might. It didn't move. I put my shoulder into it, grunting with the effort. It scraped upwards a few inches, then stopped. Not enough to climb through. I looked around for something to break it with. A heavy brass candlestick sat on the dining table. I grabbed it, my hand closing around the cool metal. Just as I raised it, I heard a whoosh from the back of the house, and the world outside the kitchen window turned a bright, hungry orange. The fire was lit. A wave of heat washed through the house. The living room erupted in a roar as the flames found the gasoline-soaked floors. The smoke was immediate, thick and black and choking. I didn't have time to be delicate. I swung the candlestick with all the force I could muster, smashing it against the window pane. The glass shattered, exploding outwards onto the lawn. I used the candlestick to knock out the remaining shards around the frame, cutting my hand in the process. I didn't even feel the pain. I scrambled through the opening, tumbling onto the soft, damp grass of the front lawn. I was out. But Lily and Marmalade were still inside, in my bedroom, directly above the raging heart of the fire. "Lily!" I screamed, my voice raw with smoke and terror. I ran around the side of the house, the heat from the windows so intense it scorched my skin. I could see the flames inside, a demonic, dancing orange that was consuming everything we owned, everything Mark and I had built. I reached the backyard and looked up at my bedroom window. It was still open. "Lily!" I screamed again. "Wake up!" But she was sedated. She wouldn't wake up. The trellis. I ran to it, grabbing onto the thick, dry wood. It felt surprisingly solid. I began to climb, my bare feet finding purchase on the wooden slats. My cut hand protested, leaving bloody smears on the wood, but I ignored the pain. All that mattered was getting to that window. The fire was roaring now, a living, breathing monster. Smoke was pouring from the window I was climbing toward. I could hear the crackle and pop of the house being eaten alive. I pulled myself up, slat by slat, my muscles burning, my lungs screaming for air. I reached the windowsill and hooked one leg over, pulling myself into the smoke-filled room. It was like stepping into a nightmare. The smoke was so thick I could barely see. The heat was immense. The floor was already hot beneath my feet. "Lily!" I choked out, my voice swallowed by the roar of the flames. I dropped to the floor, where the air was clearer, and crawled toward her bed. I found her by touch, her small, still form. Marmalade was still with her, a brave little soldier. I grabbed them both, pulling Lily into a fireman's carry over my shoulder, and then I saw her. Diane. She was standing on the lawn, by the old oak tree, just like in the drawing. She wasn't smiling. Her face was a mask of shock and fury. She had seen me go back in. She had thought I was trapped, that her plan was working perfectly. My survival was not part of the script. Our eyes met across the fiery chasm of the backyard. Her mouth opened, but I couldn't hear what she was saying over the roar of the fire. It didn't matter. I knew what she was thinking. I had ruined everything. I turned my back on her and scrambled back to the window. Getting out was harder than getting in. I had to somehow lower Lily and Marmalade down before I could climb. I sat on the windowsill, my legs dangling over the edge, and held Lily tightly, letting her slide down my body until she was hanging by her arms. I lowered her as far as I could, my muscles screaming in protest, until her feet touched the upper rungs of the trellis. "Hold on, baby," I sobbed, even though I knew she couldn't hear me. I let go. For a heart-stopping second, she was just a dead weight on the trellis. Then, her sleeping body slumped and slid, bumping down the wooden slats like a rag doll, landing in a soft heap in the rose bushes at the bottom. It was a brutal, clumsy escape, but she was out. She was safe. I tucked Marmalade into the front of my sweatshirt and started my own descent. Just as I swung my legs out, a wave of superheated air erupted from the room behind me as the fire broke through the ceiling. The force of it pushed me, and I lost my grip, falling the last 10 feet and landing hard on the patio, the breath knocked out of me. I lay there for a second, gasping, the sound of approaching sirens finally cutting through the roar of the fire. I had done it. We were alive. I looked over at the oak tree. Diane was gone. I scrambled over to Lily, my body screaming in protest. A sharp pain shot up my ankle, but I ignored it. I pulled her out of the thorny embrace of the rose bushes. She was still unconscious, a small limp form in my arms. There was a scratch on her cheek from a branch, but she was breathing. That was all that mattered. Marmalade wriggled out from my sweatshirt and began anxiously circling us, meowing loudly. The sirens were deafening now, their wail a beautiful, welcome sound. Red and blue lights flashed against the smoke-filled sky as fire trucks and police cars swarmed our quiet suburban street. I just knelt there on the lawn, clutching my daughter, watching the home Mark and I had built be consumed by a pillar of fire. It was a funeral pyre for our life together, a life that woman had tried so violently to extinguish. Firefighters swarmed the yard, shouting, unreeling hoses. A paramedic rushed over to me, a young woman with a kind, serious face. "Ma'am, are you hurt? Is the child okay?" she asked, her voice calm amidst the chaos. "She's been drugged," I choked out, my voice raspy from the smoke. "My sister-in-law, she drugged my daughter, and me. She set the fire." The paramedic's eyes widened. She immediately began assessing Lily, checking her pulse, her breathing. "We need to get her to the hospital right away." Another paramedic came with a stretcher. As they carefully lifted Lily onto it, a police officer approached me, a kiuho, tall man with graying hair and a weary expression. "Ma'am, my name is Detective Miller. Can you tell me what happened here?" I looked at him, my mind a chaotic jumble of images. The drawing, the gas can, the empty battery slot, Diane's smiling face. "She tried to kill us," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. My husband's sister, Diane. I reached into my pocket, my fingers closing around the two small, warm plastic chargers. I pulled them out. My hand was bleeding and covered in soot. It's all on here, I said, holding them out to him. She confessed. She was on the phone. It's all recorded. Detective Miller looked at the chargers, then back at my face. He must have seen the truth in my eyes, the stark, unvarnished terror and resolve. He took them from me gently, as if they were precious artifacts. Where is she now? The sister-in-law? He asked. She was right there, I said, pointing a trembling finger toward the old oak tree. She was watching. But the spot was empty. In the chaos of the emergency response, she had vanished. Find her, I whispered, a desperate plea. Please, you have to find her. They took me to the hospital in a separate ambulance. They treated the gash on my hand and x-rayed my ankle, which was badly sprained but not broken. But I barely registered any of it. My only concern was Lily. I sat by her bedside in the emergency room, holding her small, limp hand, waiting for the sedative to wear off. Detective Miller came to the hospital a few hours later. He looked even more tired than before. We found her, he said, his voice low. She was at a bus station downtown, trying to buy a one-way ticket to Mexico. She had a bag packed in a locker. Looks like she'd been planning her escape for a while. Relief washed over me, so potent and overwhelming that it left me weak. She confessed? I asked. Not yet, he said, pulling up a chair. She's playing the part of the concerned relative. Says she was out for a walk when the fire started, that she's worried sick about you and Lily. She's good. Very convincing. But the recordings? My tech team is working on them now. If what you say is on there, it'll be more than enough. He paused, his expression softening. You're a very brave woman, you know that? What you did, going back into that house, most people wouldn't have. I'm a mother, I said simply. There was no other explanation needed. Lily started to stir a few hours later, just as the sun was beginning to rise. Her eyelids fluttered open, and she looked around the sterile white room with confusion. Mommy? She whispered, her voice groggy. I'm here, sweetheart, I said, squeezing her hand. Everything's okay. We're safe. She didn't remember anything about the fire, thank God. She just remembered being sleepy after dinner. The last thing she knew, she was in her bed, safe and sound. I would have to tell her someday, but not today. Today, all that mattered was that she was alive. Detective Miller returned that afternoon. He had dark circles under his eyes, but there was a grim satisfaction in his expression. We got it, he said, holding up a small evidence bag. Inside was one of the micro SD cards. It's all there, just like you said. Her talking about the sedative, the gasoline, the insurance money. We even identified the man on the other end of the line. A former business partner of your husband's who was deep in debt. We've arrested him, too. He was supposed to provide her with an alibi. He shook his head in disgust. The part about drugging your little girl. I've been a cop for 20 years, and some things still turn my stomach. He told me that when they confronted Diane with the recording, her composure had completely shattered. The mask had crumbled to dust, revealing the ugly, greedy monster beneath. She had screamed, she had cried, she had denied, but the voice on the tape was unmistakably hers. We also found her search history on her laptop, Miller continued. Searches for how to disable a smoke detector, fastest burning accelerants, house fire accidental causes. And she'd been tracking your husband's life insurance policy online for months. It was a web of premeditated, cold-blooded evil, spun around a core of pure greed and jealousy. She hadn't just wanted the money. She had resented me, resented the life Mark and I had built. She felt it should have been hers. The fire wasn't just a means to an end. It was an act of annihilation, a way to wipe us from the earth and take our place. As I sat there in that quiet hospital room, listening to the steady beep of the monitors and the soft rhythm of my daughter's breathing, the full weight of what had happened finally began to sink in. I had been living with a monster. I had trusted her, welcomed her into my home, let her get close to my child. And all the while, she had been plotting our deaths, smiling to our faces. The betrayal was a wound deeper and more painful than any physical injury. It was a poison that I knew would take a long, long time to leave my system. But as I looked at Lily, her face finally regaining some of its color, I knew we would survive this too. We had survived the fire. We would survive the aftermath. We had each other, and for now, that was everything. The days that followed were a surreal blur of police interviews, insurance adjusters, and social workers. We had lost everything in the fire. Every photograph, every piece of furniture, every one of Lily's drawings, except for the one that mattered, which was safely in an evidence locker. We were homeless, living out of a sterile hotel room paid for by a victim's assistance fund. But we were alive. And that fact was a constant, grounding miracle. I had to tell the story over and over again, recounting every detail of that horrible night to stoic-faced detectives and sympathetic therapists. Each retelling was like picking at a wound, but it was necessary. My testimony, combined with the audio recordings, built an ironclad case against Diane and her accomplice. The media got hold of the story, of course. They descended like vultures, camping outside our hotel, their cameras and microphones hungry for a soundbite. They called me the survivor mom and painted a sensationalized picture of my harrowing escape. They focused on the dramatic climb down the trellis, the last-minute rescue. But they missed the real story. The real story was quieter. It was about a little girl with a box of crayons who saw the monster her mother couldn't. It was about a mother's intuition, that quiet, persistent voice we so often ignore, and the terrifying consequences of listening to it. I shielded Lily from all of it as best I could. We spent our days in the hotel room, reading books and playing games. I bought her a new set of crayons and a stack of fresh paper. For the first few days, she didn't draw at all. She would just hold the crayons, her small face pensive. I didn't push her. I knew she would draw again when she was ready. One afternoon, about a week after the fire, she finally picked up a blue crayon and started to draw. I watched her, my heart in my throat. She drew a small, simple house. Not our old house, but a new one, with a bright yellow sun smiling down on it. She drew 2 stick figures standing in front of it, holding hands. One was bigger, with my brown hair. The other was smaller, with her blonde pigtails. She drew Marmalade chasing a butterfly on the lawn. There were no fires, no smiling villains, no gas cans. It was just a picture of peace. I felt tears well up in my eyes. It was a picture of the future, a future I had fought for, a future we would now have to build from the ashes of our past. The legal process was slow and agonizing. Diane's trial was set for 6 months later. I would have to testify. The thought of seeing her again, of facing her in court, filled me with a dread so profound it was almost paralyzing. How could I look at the woman who had held my daughter in her lap and planned to burn her alive? But I knew I had to. For Mark, for Lily, for myself. I had to see it through to the end. In the meantime, life had to go on. The insurance money, the very same money that had been Diane's motive, ironically became our salvation. It was a strange, blood-stained inheritance, but it allowed us to start over. I found a small rental house in a different town, far away from the ghosts and memories of our old life. It had a little backyard with a swing set and a big, sunny window in the living room. It wasn't our home, not the one Mark and I had chosen, but it was a safe place. It was a start. We moved in with a few bags of donated clothes and some new furniture. It was a sparse existence, but the emptiness felt clean, like a blank canvas. We could fill it with new memories, good memories. Lily loved the new house. She chose the color for her bedroom walls, a cheerful, optimistic yellow. She started school and made new friends. The shadows in, her eyes began to recede. She started laughing again, that full-throated, joyful laugh that I had missed so desperately. She was resilient, more resilient than I ever could have imagined. I, on the other hand, struggled. I had nightmares every night, vivid, terrifying replays of the fire. During the day, I was jumpy, startled by loud noises. The smell of a barbecue or a lit match could send me into a full-blown panic attack. Trust was a concept that felt alien to me now. If I couldn't trust my own family, the woman I had known for over a decade, who could I trust? The world felt like a dangerous, unpredictable place, full of smiling masks hiding monstrous intentions. I started seeing a therapist, a kind woman who helped me unpack the trauma and the betrayal. She told me that healing wasn't a linear process, that there would be good days and bad days. She taught me breathing exercises to manage the panic attacks. She encouraged me to write, to get the story out of my head and onto paper. So I did. I wrote everything down, every detail, every fear, every moment of that terrifying night. And as I wrote, I began to feel a shift inside me. The fear was still there, but it was no longer all-consuming. It was being replaced by something else. Anger. A cold, hard, righteous anger. Diane had tried to take everything from me. She had tried to steal my future, my daughter, my life. But she had failed. I was still here, and I was going to make sure she paid for what she had done. The anger became my fuel. It propelled me through the difficult days and the sleepless nights. It was the armor I would wear when I finally had to face her in court. She had wanted to turn me into a tragic story, a cautionary tale. But I was not a victim. I was a survivor, and my survival would be her undoing. The day of the trial finally arrived. I walked into that courtroom with my head held high, my anger a protective shield around my heart. I was ready. The courtroom was exactly as I'd pictured it, somber wood paneling, flags standing stiffly in the corners, an air of heavy, formal silence. It felt cold, impersonal, a sterile environment for such a deeply personal and violent story. I sat at the prosecutor's table, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to keep them from shaking. I could feel the eyes of the jury on me, curious, pitying. I refused to look at the defense table, where I knew she was sitting. I didn't want to see her face. Not yet. The prosecutor, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davies, gave me a reassuring nod. "Just tell them what happened, Clara," she had told me earlier. "Just tell them the truth." When my name was called, I walked to the witness stand, my sprained ankle, now healed, giving only a faint twinge. Every step felt deliberate, heavy. I sat down, was sworn in, and finally, I forced myself to look at her. Diane was thinner, her face pale and drawn. The cheerful, rosy-cheeked mask she had always worn was gone, replaced by a carefully constructed facade of a wronged, grieving woman. She was dressed in a conservative gray suit, her hair pulled back neatly. She looked like a churchgoer, a librarian. She did not look like a monster. When our eyes met, she had the audacity to give me a small, pleading look, as if we were two old friends sharing a terrible misunderstanding. A fresh wave of cold anger washed over me. It steadied my nerves. Ms. Davies began her questioning, her voice calm and methodical. She walked me through the events leading up to the fire, starting with Mark's death and Diane moving in. I spoke clearly, my voice stronger than I expected it to be. I described the little oddities, the disabled smoke detector, the strange comment about the lawnmower. Then she asked me about the drawing. "Could you describe this drawing for the court, Mrs. Foster?" I took a deep breath. It was a picture my 7-year-old daughter, Lily, drew. It was our house, on fire. There were details. A red gas can by the back door, our cat's carrier safe on the lawn, and a stick figure, a woman standing under a tree watching. She was smiling. The courtroom was silent. Ms. Davies had the drawing, now sealed in a plastic evidence sleeve, entered as Exhibit A. A large projection of it was displayed on a screen for the jury to see. A child's innocent scrawl, a prophecy of horror. I could see the jurors leaning forward, their faces grim. Then came the hard part, reliving the night of the fire. I described the drugged wine, the pretense of sleep, the smell of gasoline. My voice began to tremble as I recounted hearing her on the phone, her cold, businesslike confession. "What did you hear her say?" Ms. Davies asked gently. I looked directly at Diane. I heard her say she had drugged me and my daughter. I heard her say the house was soaked in gasoline and that she was going to burn it down. I heard her say the insurance money would set them both up for life. Diane flinched, a small, almost imperceptible movement, but I saw it. The first crack in her new mask. The prosecutor then played the audio recording from the USB charger. The courtroom was filled with the sound of Diane's voice, clear and chilling, sealing her own fate. Her calm, cheerful tone as she described her plan to murder her own family was more damning than any testimony I could ever give. I could see the color drain from her face as her own words condemned her. Her lawyer, a slick, expensive-looking man, tried his best on cross-examination. He tried to paint me as an unstable, grieving widow, prone to paranoia and fantasy. He suggested I was misinterpreting a child's nightmare. "Mrs. Foster, you were under an immense amount of stress, weren't you? Grieving for your husband, suddenly a single mother." "I was grieving," I said, my voice like ice. "I was not delusional." "And this drawing," he said, gesturing to the screen. "Isn't it possible it's just a child's fantasy? Children have vivid imaginations." "My daughter drew a blueprint," I said. My eyes locked on the jury. "She drew what she was told. She drew what was going to happen. And this recording," he pressed on, his voice dripping with skepticism. "How can we be sure it's my client's voice, that it hasn't been altered?" "Because I was there," I said, my voice rising slightly. "I was lying on the floor, listening to her plan to kill us while my house filled with gasoline fumes. I know her voice. I've known it for 15 years. My testimony lasted for hours. By the end, I was emotionally and physically drained. But as I stepped down from the witness stand, I felt a sense of release. I had told the truth. I had given a voice to the horror. Now, it was out of my hands. The trial lasted for 2 weeks. Diane's accomplice, the man on the phone, had taken a plea deal and testified against her, corroborating every detail of the plan. The evidence was overwhelming. The drawing, the receipts, the laptop search history, and of course, the chilling audio recording. Diane never took the stand. Her mask of wronged innocence was her only defense, and it was a flimsy one. The jury was out for less than 2 hours. I was sitting in the front row of the gallery, holding my breath, when they filed back in. I watched the foreman's face as he handed the verdict to the bailiff. He wouldn't look at Diane. I knew then. On the charge of attempted murder, we the jury find the defendant, Diane Foster, guilty. The word echoed in the silent courtroom. Guilty. A wave of relief so profound it almost buckled me washed over. I closed my eyes, tears I hadn't realized I was holding back streaming down my face. I looked over at Diane. Her face was a blank canvas of shock. The mask was gone. All that was left was a hollow, defeated woman. She looked at me then, her eyes filled with a pure, unadulterated hatred. It was the truest thing I had ever seen on her face, and in that moment, I felt nothing but a vast, empty pity for her. Her life, consumed by greed and jealousy, had led her to this, to nothing. The sentencing was a month later. The judge called her actions monstrous and a profound betrayal of family and trust. She was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 30 years. Her accomplice received a lesser sentence for his cooperation. It was over. Justice, in its slow, methodical way, had been served. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright sunlight, feeling lighter than I had in months. The weight I had been carrying, the fear, the anger, the need for vengeance had finally been lifted. It wasn't a happy ending. There was no joy in seeing a family member sent to prison, but it was an ending. It was closure. Now, Lily and I could finally, truly, begin to heal. We could turn the page and start a new chapter, one that we would write for ourselves, free from the shadows of the past. A year has passed since the trial. The seasons have turned, and with them, a slow, quiet healing has begun. We never went back to our old town. The memories there were too scorched, the ground too poisoned by betrayal. Our new house, the little rental with the sunny window, has started to feel like home. We've painted the walls, planted a garden, filled the empty spaces with new laughter and new routines. The fire, once an all-consuming inferno in my mind, has receded to a flicker, a scar that will always be a part of me but no longer defines my every waking moment. The nightmares are less frequent now. When they do come, I have learned how to breathe through them, how to ground myself in the present, in the solid reality of my safety. I look at the sleeping face of my daughter, now 8 years old and thriving, and I know that I have nothing to fear. We survived the worst, and we did it together. Lily still draws constantly. Her pictures cover our refrigerator, a vibrant tapestry of our new life. There are drawings of her new friends, of her teacher, of the ice cream shop down the street. She draws our house with a garden overflowing with impossible rainbow-colored flowers. She draws me, always with a smile on my face. She never drew the fire again. It's as if, having delivered her warning, her mind let the image go, entrusting it to me to handle. And I did. Sometimes I wonder about that drawing. Was it just a child repeating what she'd overheard, a simple, terrifying transcription of Diane's words? Or was it something more? A child's intuition, a pure, unfiltered connection to the truth that we adults so often lose. I don't have an answer, and I've learned that I don't need one. All I need to know is that I listened. I listened to my daughter, and I listened to the quiet, insistent voice inside me that told me something was terribly wrong. It was a lesson I will carry with me forever. To trust my instincts, to trust my child, and to never underestimate the darkness that can hide behind the most familiar of smiles. I've thought a lot about Diane, sitting in her prison cell. I don't hate her anymore. Hate is a corrosive emotion, and I refuse to let her poison my life any further. The anger has faded, replaced by a deep, sorrowful understanding of her emptiness. Her life was ruled by a poverty of spirit so profound that she thought money, even blood money, could fill it. She will spend the rest of her days in a cage of her own making, a far more permanent prison than the one made of concrete and steel. And I am free. I am free to watch my daughter grow, to celebrate her birthdays, to help her with her homework, to kiss her goodnight. These small, ordinary moments are my treasures, the simple joys that Diane tried to turn to ash. They are my victory. There are days when the past feels closer, a shadow at the edge of my vision. A news report about a house fire, the smell of smoke from a distant chimney, can still make my heart seize for a moment. The trauma is a part of my story, a chapter in my book. But it is not the whole story. The story is also about resilience. It's about a mother's love, a fierce, primal force that can move mountains and, if necessary, walk through fire. It's about the quiet strength of a little girl who saw the truth and had the courage to draw it. A few months ago, Lily came home from school with a new picture. It was for a class project about heroes. I expected her to draw a firefighter or a superhero in a cape. Instead, she had drawn me. In the picture, I was standing in front of our new house, holding her hand. I wasn't wearing a cape, just my ordinary jeans and a sweater. But she had drawn a big, golden shield in my other hand. Underneath the drawing, she had written in her careful 8-year-old print, "My mom is my hero. She keeps us safe." I hung that picture on the wall in my bedroom, right across from my bed. It's the first thing I see when I wake up in the morning, and the last thing I see before I go to sleep. It is a reminder of what we survived, what we overcame, and what we have now. We have safety. We have peace. We have each other. And after walking through the fire, I know, with a certainty that fills my soul, that is more than enough. It is everything. Our life is quiet now, and I am grateful for every boring, predictable, beautiful moment. We are building a new foundation, not on the ashes of what we lost, but on the solid ground of our survival. The future is a blank page, and for the first time in a long time, I am not afraid to see what we will draw on it together.